Chapter 1. Cutpurse. This time I was sure Kamala would kill me. He held me by a fistful of my hair, high enough that I had to stand on my tiptoes and stare into his wild, bloodshot eyes. He pressed his switchblade to my throat. What brought him to the brink of threatening my life? I had woken up late. While the other boys started the day, I had chosen to sleep in a few more minutes, and on a rare day, Kamala, our master, deigned to check in on us. "Alaan!" he shouted. "Wake up, you slack-handed little maggot! Alaan!" He ripped the pallet out from under me as I opened my eyes. I rolled onto the cold, dirty floor, then scrambled to my feet before he could unleash his regular follow-up, a swift kick to my ribs. We stood in the thieves' quarters in the Kaju house, the morning sun shining in my eyes through the thin slit of a window set high near the ceiling. It was a large room, but not large enough for the 20 of us who slept there, and the smell of so many unwashed bodies together hung in the air. The others stood around me, bundling up their moth-eaten pallets, blankets, and pillows. We were all boys between 9 and 15 years old, all in the same ragged and threadbare breeches, shirt, and, if we were lucky, shoes, and all with the same 6 weeks of dirt on our necks. The others worked hard to appear busy while watching my scuffle with Kamala. That's when he grabbed me by the hair and yanked me close. As he spoke, his breath reeked of bootlegged barley wine. "Next time I call you, you lazy grub, you'd better rise and get to work." He shook me. "I did rise," I shot back, wincing at the pain of his grasp. "If you weren't holding on to me, I would be—" He shook me again, so hard my neck popped. "And you'd better not talk back to me, you worthless dog. Do you hear me?" I looked into his fierce eyes. Arguing with Kamala when he was in one of his moods was a bad idea. I worked to temper the anger out of my voice. "Yes, master, I hear you. It won't happen again." "It better not." Something metallic clicked. The familiar sound forced a whimper out of me. He lifted his switchblade so I could see the steel glimmer in the light. My breathing quickened, and I started to tremble. My mouth turned dry. I licked my lips. "Viper, strike fast," Kamala whipped the blade under my chin. "Insolence is unforgivable, no matter how much money you bring in." He pressed the blade to my neck. He won't slit my throat, I thought. He won't. It felt true enough. My master wouldn't kill me here in the thieves' quarters, where he would have to take someone from their duties to clean up the mess. No, if he were going to kill me, he'd have one of his bashers do it out back in the alley, bleed me like a stuck pig and dump me in the river. He won't kill me. But the blade dug into my neck, and my master's hungry eyes stared down at me. Big, shameful tears filled my eyes and leaked down my cheeks. Please, master, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, okay? I won't talk back again, ever. Please." The blade dug in closer. I squeezed my eyes shut. The knife retreated. Kamala snapped the blade back into its ivory grip. "Get your muck together and get out there before I change my mind." He threw me to the ground and stalked away. I wiped my face, aware of all the eyes on me. Stuffing down my terror, I rolled my bedding up and stacked it with the others, avoiding the sneers of my fellow thieves. I was the best among them. More times than not, I brought in double what they did. Yet no one got treated like me. No one got kicked for waking up a few minutes later than the others. No one got threatened by knife point. I never gave Kamala anything approaching insolence, but still he singled me out. "Don't let him get to you, Alaan," Basad, one of the others, said. His face turned into a friendly smile, but I knew there was a punchline to his comfort. "Look on the bright side." "What bright side?" "If master kills you, I'll be the highest earner in the gang." The others laughed. Basad was my age, 13, but nature had favored him with a few extra inches and a few extra pounds. So any ruckus I started with him was likely to get me twice thrashed, first by him and then by Kamala. I turned away from him, making for the door. After the rats, maybe. Basad grabbed my shoulder and yanked me around to face him again. "What did you say?" He lifted his fist. I flinched away, bracing for pain. "Hey!" Basad's fist stopped. I turned to see Ketchiva leaning against the wall, his big arms crossed. At 15, Ketchiva was the oldest. He was also the tallest and the strongest thief in the gang, and he radiated confidence and threat from his relaxed posture to the cold glower he offered Basad. "Hey, let him go." Besad's snarl turned into a pout. He released my shoulder. I stumbled to the floor with a puff of dust. Ketiva straightened. "Let's go on." I stood to my feet, keeping my eyes on Besad, but he wouldn't have dared more than to glower in front of Ketiva. I dusted myself off, turned to the door, and, with Ketiva beside me, walked out of the house during my keep. Less than an hour later, we walked the back alleys of the Middle City Bazaar. The morning sun shone over Talisman, the city of my birth, its blistering heat undiminished by the cool breeze wafting westward from the sea, along the bloated river delta and up past the ancient city walls. The homes and shops of lesser merchants rose 2 and 3 stories on either side, their cracked plaster walls offering shade against the oppressive heat. Bits of old crates or barrels, broken furniture, and empty bottles lay stacked against the walls here and there. A small pack of rats feasted on a pile of rotted fruit. They scattered as we approached them, only to gather again once we passed. I kicked a bottle out of my path. "It isn't fair. I bring in way more than Besad, but you don't see Master wagging him by the hair, do you?" Ketiva rolled his eyes. "That's because Besad gets up on time and doesn't talk back. Who cares if I sleep in a few extra minutes? I'm the best ripper in the gang. That's all that should count to get respect. What do you want? You want Master to pat you on the head, give you a big hug?" I scowled. "Shut up, Ket." "I'm serious, on. You're a thief, and it don't matter how much you slit. I heard Gamir and the others talking, them that worked over the Pearl Traders Guild, and in a month of work they brought in almost 10,000 farah. You're never going to get that much cutting purses. That's what I need, my own shakedown crew. Then I'd show 'em." I stopped and turned to a building on my left. It was 3 stories tall, made of old mud brick with little of the plaster remaining. The back door was boarded up, as was a second-story window, but I wasn't interested in going inside. Ketiva and I had been using its roof as our lookout for the past few days. I jumped and grabbed at the exposed lintel over the door and scrambled up with Ketiva behind me. I leaped over the parapet and onto the house's terraced roof, then turned to give him a hand. Once on his feet, he clapped the dust off of his hands, revealing the gap where his left ring finger should have been, then strode toward the front of the building. "What you need is to stay in line. Master's never going to respect your efforts, and if you don't learn to control your mouth, you'll be the least of your worries." "What do you mean?" "I mean Besad. You keep making enemies of bigger kids and you're going to get killed. I should have let him nail you just to teach you a lesson." "Besad's just a jackal." "Yeah, but a jackal has teeth. And if you ever try that nonsense with one of the bashers, you're going to end up with an extra smile, right under your chin." I frowned at his back, but rubbed my neck at the same time. The thought brought to mind the feel of Kamala's switchblade digging into the soft flesh there. I shivered, then shook the image away. I joined Ketiva at the building's front and leaned over the parapet to watch the crowds below mill about. Up on the roof, where there was no shade, the heat was stifling, a physical force bearing down on me. The smells of the market, sweat, salted pork, incense, and perfumes wafted my way, mingling with the salty scent of the sea that might have been my imagination. I ran the back of my hand across my forehead. Blasted heat. Let's find a few easy marks and spend the rest of the day swimming. He shook his head, glowering at the crowd below. "There are no easy marks." He rubbed at the stump of angry flesh where his finger used to be. I thought about apologizing, but Ketiva wouldn't accept it. I turned back to the crowd. The street below was wide, paved in dull cobblestone and flanked on both sides by peddler stalls, all covered in colorful canvas fluttering in the hot breeze. Soon I was smiling. I was in my element now. Kamala was far away, his threats and his switchblade too. Here I was a wolf surveying the sheep. There were hounds down there among the prey, vicious ones too. The hooded guard were ever present, their swords sharp and their short arms loaded, but this wolf knew how to blend in with his prey. The merchants, nobles, and travelers provided a broad selection of peoples from across the Vale. Here a fair, raven-haired Folgan traded with a tall, onyx-dark woman of the Encore. There a bright-eyed Calistine drank with a copper-skinned man that might have been Corsair blood but for his clothing. I even saw a grey giant lumbering among the foot traffic, as tall as a man on horseback, and a small conclave of child-faced dwarves sitting and sipping at their drinks under the pavilion of a small tea-house. I recognized appearances and attached them to names I'd heard, with no idea what those words represented. I didn't care who they were or where they were from. I processed their identities in terms of wealth versus danger. I could read the differences in their dispositions that separated the gullible or distracted from the wary. I could tell who had money and who didn't. and not just by their clothes or jewelry. This was why Camilla would never kill me. I was too good, or so I thought. I spied a middle-aged woman stepping out of a storefront to join the flow of bodies. She was dressed like a merchant, a local by her kaftan and robe. As she entered the street, she dropped a few silver coins into a purse on her belt. My smile turned hungry. I got one. Ketchiva turned to me, and I nodded. White robe. I backed away to leave, but Ketchiva grabbed my shirt by the collar and halted me. No locals. But look at the purse on her, and those dull eyes. She won't know what hit her. On, look. I turned to see what he was worried about. A pair of men followed the same direction as my mark, not 20 paces behind her. Male hauberks shine under their blue jackets. Each wore a rounded conical helm over a blue hood and mantle. They had swords sheathed at their sides, and short arms tucked under their belts. I'm not afraid of any hooded guard. Let me go, Ket. On, don't, not again. I wrenched myself out of his grip and rushed back to the alley. Don't worry, I'll be right back. I climbed down the back wall, my feet planted into the alley's packed earth, and I jogged around the building towards the road. In the shadow of the alley, I waited for my mark to pass, drawing my dagger and hiding it under my sleeve. I watched her go. Look at her, I thought. Dull-eyed fool probably doesn't know the hour. She never noticed me, and why should she? Hundreds of people milled around on the street, and I melded easily into the alley's shadow. I waited for her to pass me by, then counted to 10 slowly. I stepped out into the street and followed her. Once among the crowd, I was no longer a thief. I was just another passerby, earning no more mistrust than a barefoot priest. I was a runner, or a delivery boy, or maybe a young laborer heading to the work lines. Sure, I looked poor, dirty, and down on my luck, but I couldn't have been a thief. I looked too innocent. I wore no brands. I had all my fingers. I drew close to the mark, waiting for my opportunity. A young man with a heavy-laden basket pushed out of a door before us without looking where he was going. I turned the dagger in my hand. The man collided with my mark. The two staggered. I stepped in. I slotted my dagger into the woman's purse and twisted. Several coins fell through the slit into my outstretched palm. I pulled the knife out and pushed past the mark, and the man had made my day a little easier. Coins tinkled onto the ground, but my mark didn't seem to notice until I was several paces past her and turning into another alley. I jogged back towards my lookout spot, and Ketchiva helped me up. You blighted fool, he said, as he hauled me onto the terrace. If that woman had half a brain, she would have caught you. I sat down against the parapet and opened my hand. If she had half a brain, I wouldn't have marked her. I started counting my take. I couldn't read the print on the coins any more than I could recognize the bearded men featured on them, but I had long learned the value of a coin by its size, metal, and weight. Ketchiva sat next to me. Yes, you would. You're getting reckless on. Are you listening to me? Shut up, Ket. I'm counting. I had to start over, but when I was done, I looked at him with wide eyes and a wider grin. He frowned. How much? 12 farah and a few bits. That can't be. It is, look. I opened my hand in front of him. I would never have done so in front of any of the other thieves. Without touching the coins, he counted them out, adding up all the lesser copper coins to the value of farah. You're lucky, on, plain lucky. I grinned. Come on, let's find a pond and go swimming. I still have to find mine. I looked back down at my take. I separated 3 farah and held them out to Ketchiva. There you go. A good day's work, right? His sour expression turned dark, and he pushed back to his feet. I'm not some worthless beggar, on. I stood and joined him. Come on, Ket, it's not like that. But it's boiling out here. I just wanted to go swimming. He waved me off. Go on, then. I huffed. Ketchiva, Miss just gonna put you in a basher squad soon. Who cares about 3 farah? If it bothers you, promise to pay me back later. Ketchiva heaved a big sigh. Opening his hand before him, he frowned down at the street through the unnatural gap between his fingers, his eyes turning the strong, confident man into a scared boy. After a long moment, he turned back to me. All right, let's go. Ateba! With arms and legs curled into a ball, I dropped into the tepid water, splashing a dozen other kids. I wore only my breeches. Ketchiva and I had hidden our other clothes and our haul under a nearby rock. Bakobet was in the peak of its flood season, and had swollen to nearly twice its normal size. In the flatter plains west and east of the city, where barley and sorghum fields were now pearl farms, the river was closer to 4 times wider. But those ancient people who had engineered the city had built it up to give nothing more to the floods than they had to. Ketchiva and I had chosen one of the deeper runoff ponds near the massive wall that separated the lower and middle cities. Several others were there as well to swim or fetch water. Most were boys and girls younger than me, with the same variety of threadbare clothes and dirty skin. Nobody from the middle city would come here. Many of them had their own swimming pools, and nobody but locals came here. Even the poorest outsider would be caught dead as far from the patrolled roads here in the lower city. Far out in the deeper water, ships plied the river. A few were guided by sail or oar, but most were propelled by their side-mounted paddle wheels. These were long and low to the water, works of timber and pitch. Many had 2 or 3 tall masts, each of which seemed to exist only so that some sun-crazed fool could stand at its top and get the world's greatest view. I turned and saw Ketiva leaning against the rocky shelf that surrounded the pond. He stared at the river as he rubbed the stump of his lost finger. I swam to him and lifted myself to sit on a nearby rock. He dropped his hand into the water and looked away. I searched for something to say and found it. I worked up a chuckle. One of these days we'll find us a boat, row across the river, and score us a load of pearls. He turned me a doleful eye. That's never going to happen, On. Pearl farmer sees someone messing with his stock. He shoots first and asks questions later. They won't catch us. It's a dream, a hopeless attempt to get Master's attention that might come at the cost of your blood. I sighed. Well, you're a sack of chuckles. I'm just being reasonable. One of us has to. I looked out at the river. Another big paddle ship eased into view, creating a frothy wake behind it. This was a battleship, its hull painted red and flying the purple and gold flag of Talas. Okay then, let's just leave. Ketiva practically snarled at me. I'm serious. Yeah, let's take off on the road. We've got nothing but the clothes on our backs. No food, no money. We won't die in a matter of days. Actually, I was thinking we'd take a ship. A ship? Do you have any idea how expensive that is? But it doesn't matter because, again, no money. We have money. 12 farah. It's not much, but it's a start. Ketiva rolled his eyes. Mester must have wiggled something loose this morning. What are you talking about? This time he did snarl, gritting his teeth and glaring like a rabid dog. Do you not remember your first theft? My stomach twisted into knots, and the breath burned off my tongue. What do you mean? Tell me about your first job. I frowned and looked away. How am I supposed to remember that? I never knew a time when someone wasn't teaching me something about the job. Ripping, picking, lifting. I must have taken things from every basher and crewman in the gang and brought them to Master. Unless I got caught. I mean your real first job. Come on, Ket, let's just out with it. I sighed and looked out at the river. My stomach growled. One day, Master said I would begin the real thing. He locked me in a closet for a day without food. The next morning, he let me out, and while the bashers and crewmen ate a hot breakfast, he told me I wouldn't get a scrap until I paid for it. Ketiva nodded. Go on. I scowled at him, but he only held his flat stare. I huffed. On my way out, one of the bashers put his arm around me and whispered in my ear. He said that whatever I could rip, I should hold some back for myself. He said, you never know when Master's going to be in one of his moods and decides you haven't ripped enough. It seemed like good advice. So that's what you did, Ketiva said. You lifted a farah off a busy peddler's counter or ripped some copper from a drunk's purse, and you held a little back for yourself. Hid it away, right? I nodded. If you know the story, why not just finish it, Ala-an? I came back and Master... Something in my chest ached. He praised me, said he was proud of me. Ketiva nudged me and I looked away. My eyes stung. Then the basher showed up and asked me right in front of everybody how much I held back. I knew the rules. I said I didn't hold any back, but he didn't believe me, and neither did Master. I scrubbed an arm over my eyes and sniffed. He let the basher beat me until I confessed. It was the same with me. It's the same for all the thieves in the gang and probably all the other gangs too. We're not as free as you think, On, and if we start even thinking about holding back, it won't be a beating, it'll be our heads. You're paranoid, Cat. Before he could argue, I kept going. That was a sham. Mister plants the friendly basher, then has someone follow you. After the beating, you're terrified to ever try it again, but they can't follow us all the time. Give it a rest, On. You never leave Talas Mall. You're still waiting for Master to tuck you in and give you a goodnight kiss. Shut up, Cat. I lifted myself out of the water and climbed the shelf. The afternoon sun seemed to bake the water off my back and hair. The one good thing about the heat was it hid the evidence of a long afternoon swim. I shook my head. Bah, old fool. What does he know? Why do I even care what he thinks? I hadn't yet made up my mind as to who I was thinking about, Ketiva or my master. The thoughts came to a sharp halt as I saw 3 boys hovering around the rock we'd used to hide our belongings. Besad, Gashar, and Taki. All Kaju thieves. Basad lifted my purse and smiled.